200 years after Elizabeth's reign, another deadly woman would become legend in the French Quarter of New Orleans.
The incident had such an impact on the city that for many years, many people wouldn't walk on the same side of the street as the house. Others avoided the block completely.
Amateur historian and tour guide Kalila Smith makes a regular stop at 1140 Royal Street.
The door was bolted and locked from the outside. They could hear screams and cries coming from within. The fortunate ones were dead.
It was here in 1834 what's believed to be the city's most horrendous crime was discovered.
I think that this history in New Orleans is far more bizarre than anything any fictional writer could possibly come up with.
Madame Delphine LaLaurie was an A-list socialite with money and connections.
Her husband was a surgeon, a very prominent surgeon in the city, and she was from a very wealthy French family. They were best known in the city for their lavish cocktail parties that they would throw, entertaining the upper echelon in the city, and they threw them quite frequently.
But Madame LaLaurie was not all she seemed.
As she was preparing for one of her cocktail parties, she was being attended to by a little 12-year-old slave girl by the name of Leah. Leah accidentally pulled the madam's hair as she was combing it. And in a fit of rage, Madame LaLaurie pulled out a bullwhip and proceeded to beat this little girl.
Trying to flee the beating, the little girl plunged to her death in the courtyard below.
Madame LaLaurie was brought before the courts for the death of this child. But because she was so influential, because she was rubbing elbows with all the upper echelon, she was given a mere slap on the wrist, a mere $300 fine.
Madame LaLaurie's notoriety would have ended there if it wasn't for a fire soon after. The story is still talked about by firemen today.
Well, that night, the alarm came in for our house, and when the firemen got there, they found a fire in the kitchen, and the slave told the firemen to go up to the third floor of the house and check it out.
The door was bolted and locked from the outside, yet they could hear screams and cries from within. Seasoned firemen who had obviously had experience with death before literally fell to their knees vomiting from the stench of death inside the room.
The firemen found a house of horror. It took a house fire to lay bare Madame LaLaurie, the New Orleans socialite, as a serial killer.
Upon entering one of the apartments, the most appalling spectacle met their eyes.
Corpses, people, slaves that were chained to the wall.
7 slaves, more or less horribly mutilated, were seen suspended by the neck, with their limbs apparently stretched and torn from one extremity to the other.
They found some that were buried under the flooring, mutilated bodies that were cut up.
Language is powerless and inadequate to give a proper conception of the horror which is a scene like this must have inspired.
It was just a real tragedy up there that they found.
That Madame LaLaurie had blood on her hands seems beyond doubt. Her motivation is less clear. One theory suggests Madame LaLaurie and her doctor husband were doing their own scientific research.
Well, people used to dig up graves and dissect bodies. This wasn't usually something done for a bizarre sacrifice. This was done out of human curiosity.
In the 1830s, knowledge of anatomy was limited. A curious but warped mind might see powerless slaves as lab rats.
And back then, we didn't even know precisely how blood circulated and how the body worked. It was fascinating.
That might have been the excuse, a quest for medical knowledge, but to be performing it on live people? No, it goes way beyond that.
The scant surviving evidence also points to another motivation.
The only word that comes to mind is a sadist. A sadist derives pleasure from inflicting pain on another individual. The pain can be physical or emotional or sexual, but the sadist delivers pleasure.
And still, there's another possibility.
The truth of the matter is that no matter how cruel her behavior, it might have been aimed at trying to solve a crime.
Lester Sullivan, archivist at Xavier University of Louisiana, thinks Madame LaLaurie might have been conducting her own cruel criminal investigation.
Shortly before the mansion caught on fire, there had been a rebellion on one of the plantations her family owned, downriver in St. Bernard Parish, in which her own mother was killed. Obviously, if she's got people chained and she's interrogating them under duress, probably involving torture and such. I mean, it takes a certain kind of ruthlessness to take this kind of action, to take the law into one's own hands.
It was some sort of distorted, displaced anger for some reason that she would go to such extremes to mutilate people the way she did.
Sadist, scientist, or avenger? We may never know.
Somehow the LaLauries escaped. Now, it's a mystery what happened to them. Many people believe that they wound up going down to the river and jumping ship. Some people say they even went back to Paris.
Whatever Madame LaLaurie's motivation, one thing more than anything else made her secret slayings possible: power. In the 1880s, in Liverpool, England, a group of women ran an extraordinary cooperative.
I think everyone is familiar with the concept of women sticking together in times of trouble, but you normally assume that it's going to be a helping in a pleasant way.
Retired police prosecutor Angela Braben spent a lifetime fighting crime in English courts. But the case that fascinates her most happened before she was born.
You've got a group of women living together and they're forming a web, a syndicate of murder, and they're investing in death.
The plan was simple: ensure everyone in their immediate acquaintance, then kill them one by one.
There were 4 women who were actually killing. And then there were 5 or 6 others who were concerning themselves solely with the insurance.
The women's cunning netted them a small fortune and turned the British insurance industry upside down.
I admire them in a strange sort of way. They worked out the insurance rates, how would they get the best rates for different people. They knew all the rules and regulations of the insurance and burial clubs, virtually backwards as far as I could work out.
Together, they formed a predator pack. More common among male perpetrators, the female pack can be just as formidable.
The pack mentality can certainly take over in a situation where you have a number of perpetrators with a common goal, to obtain money. That money makes people do all kinds of things.
No one was spared. Siblings, husbands, strangers. Like young boarder Maggie Jennings.
There's probably one person in the group that's the leader, the alpha female. The one who came up with the idea, who drew up the plans, who gave the orders, and everybody else pretty much followed in line.
In Liverpool, the pack's leader was Catherine Flanagan. Second in command, her sister, Margaret Higgins. Their method? Poison.
Arsenic obtained from flypapers. It was very readily available. All little shops would have the flypapers. You'd soak them in water and obtain a liquid, which then could very easily be added to the food. And women being the ones who provide the food, they could mix what they wished.
Chronic ingestion of small amounts of arsenic gives very unusual symptoms. It might be the onset of intermittent abdominal pain, diarrhea, numbness and tingling in the extremities.
Arsenic was not only easily available to the Liverpool sisterhood, its symptoms were much like common illnesses of Victorian England.
The slums of Liverpool at the time would have been hideous places. There was no public sanitation. There wasn't running water. People were crowded into small areas, and disease is a very natural outcome to those circumstances.
No suspicions were raised when victims like Maggie Jennings died in the prime of life.
The doctors were expecting to find the diseases of poverty, malnutrition, and insanitary conditions. The women, therefore, made sure that the doctors found something that would fit with what the doctors were expecting.
With every death came an insurance payout to one of the group, to be later shared.
Maggie Jennings, for example, was insured for over £112, and those insurances were started approximately 12 months before she died. So that was a very good rate of return for an investment.
A good return indeed, when a laborer's weekly wage was less than £1, not even a couple of dollars. With premiums of just a few pennies a month, unscrupulous citizens could use England's life insurance companies for murderous gain.
The insurance man would go from house to house and penny here and tuppence there. And overall, one must assume that the insurance companies made a profit. But I suspect that in this particular area of Liverpool, they probably made a loss.
The women in the Liverpool Syndicate were illiterate, but that didn't hinder business. Insurance brokers at the time were eager to sign up customers for their own commissions.
They would be paid 1 year's premiums as their commission. So obviously the more people they could be encouraged to insure, the better. And if somebody was not sure about the right answers, they would make the answers up as they went along.
This confluence of poison, poor hygiene, and exuberant sales pitches created the perfect storm of murder.
Victims were chosen depending on how old they were they ill, could they be hastened, could they get insurance for them, and if so, how much? And they would choose 2 or 3 victims a year and simply kill them.
Greed can become a monster that feeds on itself. And it's one of the toughest things in the world to keep a lid on.
The Liverpool Syndicate operated undetected for at least 4 years. Their final tally would shock the country.
It's very complicated to explain who killed who. And so this is a little diagram which shows you've got the two sisters here. Certainly they killed Thomas Higgins, that's one husband gone. They probably killed the other husband, John Flanagan, as well. They certainly killed a son, a daughter-in-law, daughter-in-law's mother, a lodger, a little stepdaughter of 12, neighbours, friends, anyone else really that they could get their hands on.
It's believed the syndicate murdered at least 17 people for profit. If there was any remorse, it seemed lost in a web of shared liability.
In a gang or a pack committing a crime, whether it's one crime or several ongoing crimes, the sense of guilt, if there is any, is definitely shared. And it's something that one member of the group can take some kind of comfort in knowing, well, I didn't really do this alone. I was the group. The power of the group can be very, very strong.
In 1883, after 4 years, the group's power was finally extinguished. A suspicious relative convinced authorities to test the body of Margaret's husband. Police found arsenic, then pieced together a long trail of death. Enough evidence was found to convict Catherine Flanagan and her sister Margaret Higgins. Newspaper reports describe how they hung side by side from the gallows. The others escaped prosecution. Night duty. Veterans Affairs Hospital, Northampton, Massachusetts, 1995. It should be a quiet time of convalescing, but one nurse will see that it's not. Kristen Gilbert murders her patients using the ultimate cover: her gender and her profession. In Massachusetts, she becomes known as the Angel of Death.
Do nurses in Northampton go to work every day thinking, oh, I have to be on the lookout for a serial killer? Absolutely not. They don't want to believe it.
Author M. William Phelps, who covered this case, says Kristen believed she was committing the perfect crime. She was above suspicion, her weapon untraceable.
Here you have a blonde, 30-year-old soccer mom driving around in an SUV during the day, taking her kids to soccer practice, volunteering her time at the homeless shelters.
Professionally, Kristen is smart, reacting swiftly in emergencies. No one knows she is creating them.
Henry Houdin was a 35-year-old vet. He was a physically healthy human being, and he had been admitted to the hospital because he had this severe case of the flu. Now, Gilbert, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office, injects him with a dose of epinephrine.
The drug epinephrine stimulates the heart. It's commonly used to treat cardiac arrest, but it can also induce one.
The feeling you get when you run, which is increasing sense of your heart beating or palpitations, your blood pressure rises, you flush. These type of symptoms are exactly what you expect when somebody's given epinephrine.
Picture this. Epinephrine's injected into your arm. Your arm immediately gets hot and it starts burning. Your heart starts racing out of control and you go into massive cardiac arrest.
Kristen calls an emergency code, a hospital alert to the cardiopulmonary resuscitation unit, or CPR. Little does the CPR team know they will only make things worse.
All right, we're gonna have to shock him. Clear.
When a CPR team comes in the setting of a patient in cardiac arrest, one of the very common things you might consider doing is giving epinephrine, which would be a great drug to give in most settings, except in the setting of epinephrine-induced cardiac arrest. Then you'd be basically giving the patient a double dose.
If Gilbert gives an injection of epinephrine to kill this person, and the doctors come in and they give him more epinephrine, you tell me, how are they going to find out that she's using epinephrine to kill these people?
Incredibly, despite the double epinephrine dose, Henry Houdin survives. For the moment.
45 minutes go by. All of a sudden, another code is called by Gilbert on Houdin. He goes back into this cardiac arrest.
Clear.
Investigators believe she injected him for a second time. They save him again. This was a strong man. He fought for his life. He wanted to live, this guy. He wasn't gonna let a 30-year-old soccer mom take his life from him, okay?
Twice more that night, the CPR team is called to Henry Houdin.
Another code is called. Lo and behold, another code. Oh my God, on Henry Houdin. He goes into massive cardiac arrest, but this time they just cannot save him. He goes brain dead. They cannot save his life.
Kristen's tracks are covered by legitimate doses of epinephrine.
People have to think about looking for it. It's not something that's commonly looked for as a cause of death, especially if you're not considering homicide.
So why does Kristen kill people she hardly knows? Prosecutors believe her motive is ego.
During code situations, she was the go-to nurse. She was the take-charge nurse. She took charge of them codes. She gave orders. She directed traffic. She knew exactly what to do.
Criminal profiler Dr. Deborah Sherman Coughlin recognizes this behavior. It's known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy.
Munchausen is a condition where typically it's a caregiver who will harm either a child or someone who's in his or her care, and then come in and act like a hero in order to get a high and attention and look like a hero. And they crave that excitement, and so they do that over and over and over again.
And there was one person Kristen wanted to impress more than anyone, her lover, the hospital security guard.
When she would inject her victims with the epinephrine, the security guard always had to come to the codes. He was required to do that. And she would flirt with the security guard when she was coding the victims and killing the victims.
During one code, one nurse reported, Gilbert was on top of a patient, straddling a patient like one would straddle a horse. She lifts up her skirt. Look at my garter. And she wanted to show it off while a poor man is fighting for his life.
Kristen Gilbert will regret her final bid for attention. Disguising her voice, she makes a series of bomb threats to the hospital.
Yeah, police officer Prospect, may I help you?
This is my last call. In 25 minutes, I'll see you in hell.
Narcissists, they have to act out. They need an audience. This phone gave her the stage to reach her audience at the Veterans Affairs Hospital.
Police trace the call, finding Kristen's fingerprints on the phone.
It was her undoing because about a week after making this phone call, they got the search warrant They got their evidence, and they made an arrest. They found this handbook of poisoning, tattered and torn, in the pantry of her home. And they also found intravenous medications. This book, what is the page that's ripped out? What is the page that's most tattered and torn in this book? The page is epinephrine. So she was clearly studying this page.
Kristen's homework doesn't surprise Dr. Deborah Sherman Coughlin.
What I found when I interviewed female serial killers was that they would get books on pathology, criminal investigation, forensic science, and then they would read that information, learn about that information, incorporate it into their fantasies first, and then begin experimenting and use that in their crimes. They learn all about criminal investigation and killing to find out the perfect way to do it without getting caught.
But Kristen does get caught. Not by toxicology, but by traditional police work. She's serving 4 consecutive life sentences for murder. Some believe there may have been more.
Authorities explained to me that there's a possibility that she could have killed 75 people. If that's true, then she would be one of the most prolific serial killers in this country.
Kristen Gilbert, like Marianne Cotton and Nanny Doss, crossed a line few would dare, from fantasy to deathly reality. Police Detective Sergeant Bob Wells tries to forget the day he discovered one of Australia's most shocking crimes.
You just sort of have lost the majority of your senses for a short period of time until you actually regathered them and realised that it was reality and not a horror scene.
Daily swims are an attempt to wash away the images still lurking in his subconscious.
Clothing, cutlery, meat. It's something I'm still trying to come to grips with even today, emotionally and mentally.
Bob Wells would be just one of the lives forever changed by the deeds of Catherine Knight.
I think most of us expect somebody who's done what Catherine's done to have horns growing out of her head or to be restrained like Hannibal Lecter. But she was a very ordinary-looking woman.
Another to be affected would be journalist and author Peter Lawler, assigned to a story his newspaper couldn't publish.
Editors make a decision whether a story is palatable for people to read with their breakfast in the morning, and there was a decision made that this one wasn't palatable. It couldn't be reported. It was too horrific.
But like many, Catherine drew him in.
I wanted to know that a person who could do what Catherine Knight did was insane or not sentient. But the court decided that she was sane and she could have been the person next door.
Catherine Knight seemed to live on the edge.
She had a wild temper. She had too many boyfriends, too many fathers for the children. She came from a wild family.
By her early 40s, Catherine had experienced 4 rocky relationships. Each time, she was asked to leave. But each time, she found her way back.
She knew how to keep a bloke happy. She put up their mates drinking in the shed. She had dinner ready when they got home. Generally, she knew how to keep a bloke, and she was manipulative like that.
I think she was a very hard woman, very strong physically. I think she probably emotionally very vulnerable.
Her fiancé, John Price, was the type of man Catherine sought out.
She was a tough country girl and they were tough country blokes. They loved to drink, they liked their knees up on a Saturday night.
But all too soon, each partner discovered Catherine's secret. An illness called borderline personality disorder.
Borderline personality disorder is kind of a catch-all term for a condition that manifests itself, the individual, and it's usually women, it can be men, very moody, tremendous mood swings.
Former FBI criminal profiler Candice DeLong says sufferers can turn quickly from lovers to fighters.
They feel slighted when there was no slight. They are prone to being very suspicious that their partner is cheating on them. Everything reflects back to somebody is taking advantage of me, and I must do something about it.
John Price usually weathered the stormy Catherine, knowing the loving Catherine would soon return. Then one day, his partner went over the line, threatening his job at the coal mine with a home video.
She'd filmed the contents of his garden shed, and in Pricey's garden shed was a first aid kit from the mine, which he'd allegedly stolen.
The pair had argued over money. Catherine wanted revenge. She sent the video to the mine boss, suggesting John was a thief.
The most important thing in most men's lives is their job. And that is the one area that the woman may feel if she can mess this up for him, all the better.
John was fired.
He threw her out of the house, said he'd never have her back. Unfortunately, he had her back within 6 months because Catherine turned on the sweet, loving side again and got back in there somehow.
And I think that there was more so a physical attraction towards her than anything else.
One man knew what John Price was going through.
Well, her mother said to me, just after we first got married, she said, "You want to watch this one? If you do the wrong thing by, she will kill you."
Catherine's first husband, David Kellett.
And I brushed it off as just one of those things that mothers say, and it didn't really dawn on me that, but one day she would go over the edge.
In late 1999, David and John met to compare notes.
I knew John Price, and he said to me he wants to get out of a relationship, but he's scared to get out. And I said, well, these days you can take all these domestic violence orders against each other, whatever. And he was just so scared, he was almost shaking. He was really scared.
Little did either man know, Catherine would soon commit one of Australia's most shocking crimes. In an undisclosed Australian city, David Kellett lives in hiding. Although he left his ex-wife many years ago, recent events make him fear for his life. His former spouse is Catherine Knight.
You can't change a psychopath, and I believe in my own heart she's a psychopathic killer, and she'll never change.
In a small Australian town, Catherine and David, her first love, planned a life together.
To start with, she's the most wonderful woman I think you could wish for. So devoted, perfect mother, perfect housewife.
But Catherine's borderline personality disorder was never far from the surface.
She could snap just like a biscuit. It wouldn't take much to set her off. The slightest thing, if she made a cup of coffee and there's no water in the jug, it's just something as simple as that.
One night, a darts competition almost ended David's life.
One of the elements of borderline personality disorder is that you cannot stand abandonment. And that means if somebody says they're going to be home at 10 o'clock, you want them home at 10 o'clock. And by 10:05, you're in a rage. By 10:10, you're in a murderous rage.
And she rang about, I think about 10 o'clock, and said, the pub's closed, come on home. And I said, well, the dart competition hasn't quite finished yet, I'll be home when I'm ready.
There was an insult to the core. When he said, I'll be home from the pub shortly, she took that as the same as being stabbed in the heart, as total rejection. And the way to make herself feel better is to exact revenge.
When somebody's getting stressed, it's usually a reaction that comes down to fear. Fear causes the release of adrenaline or epinephrine. So the heart would start beating more rapidly. Somebody would start breathing more quickly. There would be that fight or flight reaction.
David Kellett was coming home to a biochemical maelstrom.
She'd hit me so hard on the back of the head that my eyes went black. I woke up 2 days later in a hospital. Spent all my clothes in the bathtub, everything I owned, every bit of clothing she'd burnt in the bathtub.
And when the fury subsided, the caring Catherine returned.
A couple of days later, after being released from hospital, she went and bought me all brand new clothes. It was just like the type of person she was.
But there was something more frightening than Catherine's moods. A slaughterhouse worker, she brought her tools home to hang above the marital bed.
The knives were hanging on the wall. I had put a special hook there so she could hang her knives, and no one touched the knives. Her knives were the most treasured item that God ever gave to her.
We are drawn to certain jobs, hobbies, vocations, avocations, because of inner needs. My guess is that she was drawn to work in a profession that allowed her to have access and use of knives on a daily basis because that was something that she found interesting, something that met some deep-seated need.
She was just totally and absolutely possessed by knives. They were her life.
Catherine's obsession had a name.
Picarism, which is a clinical term, someone that is aroused or finds pleasure in the idea of cutting, slicing, and stabbing skin. The image in the individual's mind of the knife piercing skin is pleasant for them, or even arousing.
Catherine's fascination with blades and her violent moods were on a collision course. The warning signs were enough for David Kellett. He left Catherine after 10 years. John Price wouldn't be so lucky. In small-town Australia, Catherine Knight was brewing her own personal storm. Her target, fiancé John Price. Catherine's ex-husband, David Kellett, knew John was playing a dangerous game.
John Price was a good bloke. I'd only met him the once, but I found him to be very sincere and very scared. I believe he broke off the engagement, and I believe Kathy couldn't stand to be left alone again.
Catherine's borderline personality disorder had proven too much. John asked her to leave, as he had done several times before. But this would be the last. Catherine would end their arguments forever.
The video that Catherine made the day she killed John Price is much like the other videos in her collection. She drove to her daughter's place to film the grandchild, and there's some beautiful footage of Catherine playing with this little baby on the ground. And then there's a moment when Catherine addresses the camera and says, "I love my grandchildren. I hope I will see you all again." And it's as if she's making a last will and testament. This was a signal, a definite signal that she was going to kill John that night and that her life was not going to be the same the next morning.
On the morning of March 1st, 2000, Detective Sergeant Bob Wells was called to John Price's address.
It's still something that has a great effect on me today. It's something I'm still trying to come to grips with even today, emotionally and mentally.
Catherine's fury created a crime scene unlike any in Australian history.
I think upon walking into that particular crime scene, it was horrific carnage that was throughout that house from one end to the other. Had almost anybody who went into the house that day in sort of a feeling of numbness for quite some time before they came to actually register what had actually happened, you know.
Catherine had been to work with her knives.
He was stabbed approximately 37 times, about the body. Information from the forensic people were that one of those blows was a fatal blow to the heart, which eventually was the cause of death.
One well-placed stab is all that's necessary to kill someone. 37 indicates to me a lot of anger, and probably a number of those stab wounds were post-mortem. Just couldn't stop killing him.
But Catherine's revenge would go further, much further.
The murder was ritualistic. Catherine went out that day, she prepared for it. She went to the welfare shop and she bought a black nightie, a sexy black nightie with buttons down the front. She went to his house late.
While visiting her estranged partner, Catherine stabbed him 37 times. She did not stop there.
And at some stage, something clicked in Catherine's mind. She'd had her initial revenge, and then I think she decided she wanted to have some fun. She went back to the life she loved, to cutting up animals and carcasses and that sort of business.
Catherine had been cooking, as she had almost every day, preparing an evening meal of meat and vegetables. When police arrived at the crime scene, they found a pot still warm on the stove and 2 meals waiting on the table. In horror, Detective Sergeant Bob Wells realized that the meal was made from her former partner, John Price.
I really think at the time it was hard for me to say, well, how could any human do that to any other human?
I cried for days, in bed, out of bed, walking around, just to think what she'd done.
Catherine was found asleep in bed. She'd unsuccessfully tried to overdose on prescription drugs. The storm had passed.
This is dreadful, gruesome, horrible behavior that we rarely see. We see it, but it's not very common.
Her father had a stick above a hallway. It was called the killing stick. And he would flog his children, absolutely flog them on the head, the arms, body, wouldn't matter where, and just totally just flog them.
I think it was a built-up anger over years of failed relationships, and got to the point where she just couldn't go on any longer, and the fact that she might face rejection by another partner again drove her to the point of where she just lost control.
Just because she was a butcher doesn't mean she decided to do these horrible things. She became a butcher because she had an interest in cutting, slicing, and doing those kinds of things. My guess is she had feelings and thoughts and desires to do those kinds of things, the things she did to him post-mortem when she was a young girl.
The court found Catherine to be of sound mind when she butchered John Price. She serves a life sentence.